In this lesson, we're going to cover zero-day vulnerabilities and exploits. First, we have a zero-day vulnerability. A zero-day vulnerability is any vulnerability that's discovered or exploited before the vendor can issue a patch for it. For example, if there's some kind of a flaw in the Windows operating system and Microsoft doesn't know about it, but an attacker is able to figure it out, this would be considered a zero-day vulnerability because the vulnerability exists, but the manufacturer, in this case Microsoft, is not aware of that vulnerability. Now, if a threat actor discovers a zero-day vulnerability, this means they could develop an attack or an exploit to target and victimize that vulnerability. This is known as a zero-day exploit. Now, a zero-day exploit is any unknown exploit in the wild that exposes a previously unknown vulnerability in the software or hardware, and this can create complicated problems for us as cybersecurity professionals well before anyone realizes that something is wrong. When we're dealing with a zero-day vulnerability, this is something that somebody found out in the wild and they said, I found a new way to break into something. And so, as a technician, we're not going to be able to detect that or stop it because that attacker knows there's a vulnerability in the system before we do. This is why it's called a zero-day vulnerability, zero-day exploit, or zero-day attack, because the attack will actually happen on day zero, or the first day that this malicious code is being discovered. This becomes a really big problem because our traditional antivirus and anti-malware software products don't have the signatures to match up with that exploit yet because it's brand new and it's the first time that anybody has ever been targeted with this type of an attack. Now, when you're working in the field, you'll often hear people use the term zero-day in multiple different cases, such as to refer to the vulnerability, the exploit, or both. In the old days, zero-day simply referred to the vulnerability itself, but in recent years, people have started to use the term zero-day to refer to the specific type of malware that exploits a zero-day vulnerability. You may see either term being used on the exam, and when they talk about zero-day on the exam, they may be talking about the vulnerability, the exploit, or the malware. So it's really important for you to read the question in order to understand the proper context of what they're describing. Now, the next thing we have to think about when we talk about this zero-day malware is how serious is it? Well, zero-day exploits are really big business. These things cost a lot of money and a lot of time to develop. For example, if you become a bug bounty hunter in the cybersecurity field later on, and you're able to discover a zero-day vulnerability, you can actually get a lot of money for turning that over to the company that developed the original software, because they don't want those 0 days to be known about and be on the open market. Instead, they want to identify that, patch it, fix it, and then make their software more secure. Additionally, these 0-day vulnerabilities and exploits are also sold to other government agencies, law enforcement agencies, and even to criminals on the dark web. For example, some 0-day exploits in the past have sold for hundreds or thousands of dollars. Some have even sold for over $1 million, like one 0-day exploit that was targeting Apple iPhones in earlier versions of iOS. Now, as you can see, 0-day vulnerabilities and their associated 0-day exploits can be a really big business. Now, because these 0 days cost so much money to acquire, most threat actors will only exploit a 0-day vulnerability for a very high value attack. Basically, they're going to save and stockpile these 0 days for a rainy day when they're going after a really, really important target and not just going after your grandmother's laptop. Instead, most threat actors are going to try to target known vulnerabilities first by using generic or off-the-shelf malware. If that attempt isn't successful on their desired target, then they may choose to use one of their 0 days against that target instead. This is why it is so important to always have an up-to-date antivirus software on your system, because those attempts to exploit the known vulnerabilities that they're trying first are going to be caught by the antivirus and blocked. This will give you a warning that someone is targeting your system, and that way you can better prepare yourself to fend off a future attack. Often, countries and nation-states are stockpiling these 0 days so they can use them as part of their spying or espionage operations or other things that are considered a high strategic value for them. So, keep in mind when we talk about 0-day vulnerabilities and 0-day exploits, you're talking about a vulnerability that is being exploited before the developer knows about it and can release a software patch or security fix for that vulnerability. This makes them extremely destructive because they cannot be stopped by traditional antivirus or anti-malware solutions because the signatures haven't been written yet for those pieces of software. Now remember, when it comes to a 0 day, this means that your system can be vulnerable for days, weeks, or even years without you even knowing it because the software developer themselves doesn't know that vulnerability exists and therefore they can't make a patch for it.